Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of After Further Review, episode 96. Oh, by the way, next Friday, John.
Yeah.
Next Friday, right before the holiday week, I should say, is our 100th episode. And
I hate to tell you, Mark, but due to my new gig, next Wednesday will be my last day with After Further Review. So 99 episodes is all you're getting, people. Not true.
All right.
Not true.
That's true.
Remarkable.
Yeah, how about that? But next Wednesday is that your first day?
Thursday rehearsal, and then Friday night game versus the Heat.
If
I pass the background check.
A week from Thursday.
Yeah. Week from Thursday is the rehearsal. Yeah. So,
wow. I figured that you'd be putting in a lot more practices. Usually the head coach is there far in advance of the first game.
I'm not coaching. I'm not coaching the team. And if I did, I'd be horrible because I don't like the shot clock. So I would just have them go straight to four corners at all times. It's going to be a limited amount of success that way.
You don't like the shot clock, John?
Not at all. Take it off. Get rid of it.
Why?
It's one place where I'm really old school.
One place?
I don't think I'm old school a lot of other places. Where are other places am I old school?
Well, I would say we both are old school with the DH. It's pretty old school.
Is that even old school now? I mean, that's just I don't even know what that is anymore. The DH is old school for
I mean, the shot clock is
yeah. No, I don't like the shot clock. I love those
old school. It's before old school.
I know.
Like before the NBA was even the NBA.
I agree with John here, and I also think that John may agree with me on the 3-pointers because they've kind of ruined the game. There's no real inside game anymore.
I'd back them up. I mean, another 14, 16 feet. I mean, if you're going to do it, then I want it one hand throw up. That's it. None of this set shot from just beyond the top of the key. Yeah, no, I love Mark. I want to see like those old
10 to 9
games. Yeah, exactly. I think there was a game with North Carolina, and Dean Smith went to the four corners, and I think they scored like 4 points in the first half, but I think they were up 4-3. Now that's basketball.
Yeah, that's really compelling basketball. Although I guess in a way you could argue that it is. It's what you get used to. It's what anyone can get used to. We can get used to. We're totally used to masks and not going out and not traveling. Well, most of us. We're used to all of these new things. It's amazing what we can get used to. It really is. And we're used. We adjusted to a 60-game baseball season. Basketball's turning around. They've adjusted so much that that you are now a PA announcer for a NBA team. You're the voice of the Toronto Raptors, for crying out loud.
Well, I don't know. I don't think that's what the NBA
out there.
I don't think that's what the NBA wants to lead with for 2020. Hey, look at this. Look at this Yahoo doing 20 games ish. Good Lord. Well, let's see if it happens. It's one of those things where, as with everything in the world, I am completely prepared for this to fall apart.
I hear you. My son, is slated to go to Singapore as a John Lennon and the Beatles band in like one of the only Royal Caribbean cruise lines in the world because it's relatively safe in that part of the world. And he's been quarantined now for 7 weeks there because of all kinds of shenanigans and hoops and other things that have happened. So who knows if that's going to happen? Who knows if anything's going to happen? You're absolutely right. To that, Mike Krzyzewski has some point. We'll get to it a little bit later in the show, but we want to talk about his comments on college basketball. We'll talk about college football as well. The playoff standings came out. The rankings came out. Yawn yesterday. Although, how about College of Carolina just zipping up the rankings? But we'll talk about
that's Coastal Carolina.
What did I say?
College of Carolina. You just don't care. What if Coastal College? What the hell ever it's called? God, you're such an elitist.
See, again.
You really are. What are you bitching and moaning about? The only college football teams you care about are the top 5 or 6. You hate those lower level teams.
No, I don't. I enjoy
them of opportunity to play in bowl games.
No, I don't know. I think they should be given more opportunity to play in better bowl games.
All right.
I have the problem with the lame bowl games. I did have a problem with it. I've turned the corner on that, but I do have a strong equal opportunity gene in myself that wants justice for the little guy. I really do. So Coastal Carolina College of Coastal.
I think part of your problem with the bowl games is the silly names. Once the names got silly, when it was the Magnolia Bowl or even the Pecan Bowl, when it's something like that, you could get behind. But when it became the Iowa Amway Wheat Thresher R&D Services Volkswagen Bowl, and you started having an issue with it.
Pro Ethanol Bowl is when the Iowa one.
The Iowa All Corn Fuel Bowl. Yeah, exactly. And I think a lot of people turned the corner on that, truthfully, with the Poulan Weed Eater Bowl, which has been gone forever. I think Poulan, I don't think they were shut down due to that, that thing that we're not allowed to discuss. Poulan may very well be around, but that was like the first really weird, because before that it was still the Tostitos Fiesta Bowl or whatever. But I think that actually, Mark, some of the silly names, it might have turned a few people. Because for you, it's the armed forces, man. You just can't stand the armed forces. God almighty, you are so anti-military.
It's not about the armed forces. It's about Bell Helicopter. That's the problem. Well, it's about Bell Helicopter.
About 80% responsible for Vietnam. So
exactly,
okay.
Their complicity in just dragging that thing on for a half a decade, if not more. So, but we'll talk about the college football playoff, and Ohio State's in a bit of a pickle, I think.
Yeah,
we'll talk about that, and we'll talk about the NFL as well. Biggest surprises. I thought that's the best way on a Wednesday to kind of talk about the NFL, because I have 3 ones off the top of my head that I didn't even have to think about, and I think they're all very fun, and I'm sure all the two of you all probably have some as well. And then I'm going to throw out a question for our listeners out there that they can respond to on podcastafr@gmail.com, and that will be at the end of the show. And not only that, speaking of old school, John, we are bringing back progressive trivia today. It's not like I didn't enjoy the trivia. I enjoyed the trivia. It was a lot of fun.
Right.
But there's something comforting about progressive trivia. There's something warm, inviting, and comforting around the holidays. So much insecurity about the virus and what's going to happen. And
as the temperature and our bank accounts drop, yes, we need to wrap ourselves in a blanket of something warm.
Yes, and we do have a little hope at the end of the tunnel with the vaccines coming around, and perhaps that will save the day. But at the moment, we need a little comfort. So let's go to our progressive trivia. First set of clues coming up right now. We're looking for a baseball player, because what's more comforting, John, than the pastoral sport formerly known as our national pastime? I played for 17 plus years, scored over 100 runs in the season 2 times, and batted a career .274. That's a career is a new sort of the evolution of the English language. A career .274. Career numbers. Oops. See, I blew that. See, wow, look at that. So forget the 315. It's .274. Yeah. We just mentioned that.
Okay.
But 2,500 plus hits.
All right.
1,600 plus RBIs.
Mm-hmm.
And he's a Gold Glover. So he batted .274, not .315.
Okay.
2,500 plus hits, 1,600 plus RBIs. That's quite good. Scored over 100 runs in the season 2 times in over 17 years in the bigs.
All right. I thought you were throwing out a math problem. And it's like, add those 2 numbers together and divide by 2, and you'll get his average.
Yeah.
That's how we're
sounds like
to
a
make
trivia
it more
question.
Difficult. Yeah.
Those were like my trivia questions.
Yes. He's rusty. Give it a minute.
That's okay. It's all right.
It's true.
Unilaterally decided to make this work. If it all collapses, it's not on my shoulders. So I feel good about it all.
All right. The Tropical Smoothie Cafe Frisco Bowl from Frisco, Texas.
December 19th. Just coming up next Saturday.
It's
the tie-ins.
All-American Conference, or the Conference USA, or a MAC, or a Mountain West Conference.
Last year was Kent State and Utah State. Mark, you remember that one? We had people over.
I don't.
Hey, it looked like it was a decent game.
51-41. Exactly.
I don't. It is not Mike Schmidt, but that's a nice guess. And it's not Will Clark either. Wow, 51-41. All right. Biggest surprises in the NFL. I will give you my 3 right off the top, and then I'd love to hear any of them ones you have, Johnny, Jeff. Mm-hmm. Comments by Lenny and Joe, who are our loyal viewers.
Yes.
On the live stream, and we have a few loyal listeners on the podcast as well. First thing I would say is that the Rams surprise me every week. It's not this season. It's every week. The Los Angeles Rams surprise me. I have yet to know who they are, what they'll do, how they'll perform.
And tomorrow night's a perfect example of that. Isn't that tomorrow night, the Rams and the Patriots, or do they play this way? I think it's Rams and Patriots.
Tomorrow night.
Tomorrow night. How interesting a football game is that?
Yeah. Seriously, it's very, very interesting, and who knows how that's going to play out. Who knows how that's going to play out. Now, the Patriots have not done well, I don't think, against the NFC West this year. So we'll see how they respond. But we did know that, Belichick shut down that vaunted Rams offense of 2 years ago with Todd. Yeah. Todd Gurley was banged up, but they scored 7 points.
Yeah. And they're also, we mentioned it as well, New England's kind of figured out their offense with Cam a little more. Like I said, it's not really a downfield, terribly dynamic passing game, but they do have a better handle on it than they did early in the season. So I just think we talked about it. I think the Patriots, throughout the rest of the season, they're in the playoff hunt. Whether they make it or not, really doesn't matter to me. I think they're going to be a team nobody wants to play moving forward. And to your point, Mark, the Rams tend to be an enigma. More good than bad, but there is bad that worries you.
It just, you just don't know from week to week. They're 8-4. They've lost the Dolphins. They've lost the Niners twice. I think they maybe play up or down to their competition. Perhaps that's
maybe a little bit
one of the deals. It's not Rod Carew, by the way. Steve Carricker with a guest in there. All right,
University of Virginia offensive lineman Steve Carricker.
Very nice.
Contractually obligated to mention. By the way, did not care for your feelings about bowl games. By the way,
he's out. He's the guy. He's the guy.
Doesn't care for you.
Steve, I apologize. I have, for what it's worth, I've turned the corner on that. And it's, because of people that may not have an opportunity to ever do that. Now they do because of the, bowls like the Tropical Smoothie Cafe Frisco Bowl from Frisco, Texas. Just a bed of college football fandom. All right. So Josh Allen, to me, is a massive surprise. I don't think anyone expected him to carve up the 49ers defense the way he did. He was 32 of 40. He threw for over 400 yards, I think, or 300 yards and 4 touchdowns. I think he's had 2 or 3 games now this season where he's had over 300 yards and 4 touchdowns. He was on fire. He can win with his legs. He can move the chains with his legs. His accuracy is unbelievable, the way he sees the field, and it's his 3rd year. Yeah. Traditionally, in the NFL, John, it's the 3rd year that quarterbacks who are going to be good really do blossom. And I know we've had quarterbacks, obviously, recently and in the past to some degree with like Dan Marino that have accelerated that timeline. But 3 years is sort of when they start figuring it out. And I'll tell you why it's a surprise. Everyone thought he was good. He started off fine.
10th overall pick, I believe.
A little bit in a couple of games.
No, we've got
he is performing at an elite level.
Yeah.
I mean, this year he can be compared with the best quarterbacks in the NFL, I think. And
no, I don't think there's any doubt. I don't think there's any doubt. And coming out of college, remember the knock on him was that he wasn't an accurate thrower. And he's proven to be an accurate thrower, both certainly a much more accurate thrower in the pocket than he had been. And Troy Aikman kept, I think it was Troy Aikman or Moose Johnston, all those ex-Cowboys. They all look and sound the same to me. He pointing out that
they'll be at the Frisco Bowl.
I'm sure he will. While rolling right out of the pocket, Josh Allen's a nightmare for people because he's like 6'6" and he can move.
And when he is dangerous when moving to his right. And I'm not sure why the Niners weren't just adjusting on that side of the ball. It was really interesting. It's like they couldn't dial up anything that could slow them down. And that was an impressive win by the Bills. And they're 9-3, and they're a miracle throw away from being 10-2. Let's face it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So that's a 10-2 team basically at this point in time.
And remember, after last year, they were a playoff team last year, but we thought coming into this season that they'd be among the 50% of teams that did not make the playoffs because, it's generally about half turnover. And we talked about Buffalo being one of those teams that we thought, 3rd year under Josh Allen now. Maybe people have a little more film on him. Maybe they caught up with it. He's just gotten better. There's no doubt about it. And I don't know why, because Lamar got so much credit last year for his improvement. And I think Josh Allen is right there this year. I think you could look at Josh Allen and go, my goodness, year in and year out in his 3 years in the league, he's improved every year. He's very impressive.
Yeah, and continuing to be more and more impressive, almost to a scary point at this point in time. And the last one, Lenny brings up Alex Smith, comeback of the century. There's no doubt about that, but it has to do with that. It has to do with Washington Redskins they're
Washington football team.
I'm so sorry. They are a delightful. I really am. They are, and I just don't know why they changed it. They are, every time I make that mistake, I'm going to claim it wasn't a mistake.
Okay, fair enough.
So I don't look incompetent. I just look racist, and I'd rather have the.
Wow.
Just totally kidding, obviously, but that's the Washington football team is a delightful surprise. I can't believe they did what they did. They were down 14-0. It looked like that game was just going to be Washington's had a nice year. They beat the bad teams, and now they're going to get blown out by, this 11-0 team. And they hung in, and Alex Smith was terrific. And here they are. They're tied. They're in second place technically because they've lost to the Giants, but they are right there. They are right there in the NFC East, and they are playing well. They are playing very, very well right now. And so are the Giants. But to me, Washington's much more of a surprise, especially with Alex Smith.
Interesting, because I was going to say, for me, the Giants were more of a surprise because I did not expect – I was not a huge fan of the Daniel Jones drafting Daniel Jones, and I thought they would be really the bottom of the barrel in that division. In fact, I thought Washington would finish third and that the Giants would finish last, and it looks like you can flip that around. The Giants are going to finish first and Washington more than likely second if things play out according to Hoyle, which they won't because it's 2020, so who knows what's going to happen. But I would say the Giants are a little more surprising to me. But to your point, Mark, people weren't really paying attention to the fact that Washington had compiled some really good defensive players on the defensive line. And Jeff and I were texting during that game. Chase Young just looks like a home run, if not a grand slam of a draft choice. He is a difference maker. They already could get pressure on you with 4 guys, but now they can do that with just 4 guys, and they have about 7 guys they can run in and out to do that and stay fresh throughout the game. So defensively, they're good with Alex Smith, and I agree it's got to be close to the comeback of the century. The offense has settled down into a more efficient. They're not a terribly dynamic offense at this point, but they've become more efficient. And with that defense on the field, 21 points for Washington, going to win you a lot of football games.
I agree with it. And I don't think they'll ever be that dynamic. Alex Smith, any offense he's run in his long career has never been that dynamic, but he's proven to be one of the best game managers out there.
Right.
And he can keep a team on the field. I mean, that's what you want. You want to keep them on the field, and then you keep your defense fresh. And you're absolutely right. Chase Young, much like Nick Bosa was last year, a complete difference maker, and it's all starting to gel. And Ron Rivera seems to be the perfect fit.
Right guy, right time, I think. I agree.
And Karma's on their side because of the name change. And
well, I always like uniform changes for that because I always remember all that futility Denver had in Super Bowls. And the minute they changed their uniform, the minute the Titans became the Titans in Titan uniforms and they weren't Oiler uniforms anymore, boom, they're in the Super Bowl.
And
so
the
I think it's more than the name, the Bucs as well,
and
more
the
than
Pats.
The name. There you go. More than the name, I think the uniform is the deal. And I really hope Washington, whatever the name of the team, I hope they stick with the numbers on the helmets. I absolutely love that. I really do.
So those are my 3 surprises. How about you? I know you mentioned the Giants.
Yeah, I was going to say the Giants because I really expected them to be the last place team in a terrible division. Now they're the first place team in a terrible division, but I do think they're also a couple of plays away from having a couple more wins as well. They played everybody tough throughout. They're defensively, they will punch you in the mouth. And I will fully admit I was wrong on Daniel Jones. I thought he was a bad choice. I thought they overreached with him. And as Joe Judge and that coaching staff learn how to use him, and I think that's really something that we're seeing a lot more in the NFL, Mark, is that the fact that everybody isn't that prototypical. Even Josh Allen is sort of a prototypical guy. He's a big guy with a gun. He just adds an athleticism that we don't often see from a man of that size. But I think we're seeing coaches are starting to learn how to utilize athletic quarterbacks better, and I think the Giants have done that. So very, very, very big surprise for me. Justin Herbert is a big surprise for me as well, because I drank a little bit of the Kool-Aid. And, I watch a lot of Pac-12 football, and I watch, through his career, definitely not, obviously haven't had as much chance this year, but 2 years ago, I thought he was the best thing since sliced bread. I'd have taken him first, all of that. His final season in Oregon, there was a bit of a drop-off, but I just don't think it would look closely enough to see that drop-off had a lot more to do with what was going on out other than Justin Herbert in Oregon, because here's another guy. He's got all that size, 6'6", and he just plays. He's not as athletic as Josh Allen, but maybe a stronger arm, which is saying an awful lot, because he's got a cannon. He has played, I think, above his years. The game doesn't seem too fast for him. So he's been a nice surprise for me as well. As far as other surprises in the NFL, just trying to think of teams that are bad that I expected to be better. I don't think there's a ton more that's surprising me. I mean, we knew the NFC West was kind of going to be what it is right now, was sort of going to be an incredibly difficult division. Teams are going to be bunched close together. I think all of those teams are good. I don't know that any of them are great, which might be a little bit surprising.
And to be fair, I think the Dolphins at 8-4 after 12 games.
Yeah, a little bit ahead of schedule.
But we've gotten.
Well, we knew they were going to be
way ahead
better.
Of schedule.
Yeah,
frankly,
but we knew they were going to be better. I think most people did.
But we thought maybe they'd go from 5-11 to 7-9.
Right.
Maybe threaten to go 500. But the fact they're 8-4 right now, they've been so good for so long of this season. It's sort of not front of mind anymore that it's surprising.
Right. Possibly, but I mean, if they ended up 9-7, let's just say that they struggle down the stretch and go 9-7. I think that's sort of where we saw them, really sitting in that 8-8, 9-7 position. So let's see what happens at the end of the year. I will agree, they are a surprise, and I think Buffalo and Miami in that AFC East. The Jets better pick up the pace, because they could be in the cellar in that division for a very, very long time. Because both of those teams look like they're built for the future. So that's about it with me. I am a little surprised that the teams in the, at least in my mind, in the NFC are that nobody is really impressing me terribly in the NFC.
The Saints are starting to impress me. That defense is starting to impress me. They're playing
better.
Like 8 points a game in the last 4 games, something like that. The Packers, Aaron Rodgers continues to play very, very well. So they're beginning to impress me. I've held back on the impression or the impressive credentials for both those teams, but it's starting to filter in a little bit for me on this side. Nina Allen has joined us, and they're in our comments section. They're talking about Ohio State and whether they deserve a playoff spot. If you hang on, Nina, we're going to talk about that in our next segment. But I want to go to Jeff first about his surprise, and then we're going to do a little progressive trivia. Then we're going to get to the college football playoff situation and Ohio State's precarious position as we speak. Jeff?
Well, going last, a lot of the surprises have been taken off the board. I'm surprised that no one was surprised at the tire fire going on in Dallas. That is nobody expected them to be a terrible team. And I believe
but not this bad. I agree.
Terrible team.
That's a big surprise. That's probably the biggest surprise.
I just didn't want to talk about them.
Well, it's great to talk about the fact that it's a tire fire. My other surprise is that even with all of the COVID things that have happened in the NFL, that they've pulled off as much as they have with this pandemic, and they didn't bubble. They're traveling around, and they've had some problems, but they've pulled off
pretty agile in responding. Really agile in responding as well.
Yeah, they have done a really good job.
And they have done a very nice job thus far. There's no doubt about that. All right, let's go to our second set of progressive trivia questions. We'll review the first one. First one has a lot of humor in it. Played for 17-plus years, scored over 100 runs in a season 2 times, batted a career .274, and then career 315.
Is this on Twitter? You just have you have fewer spaces to use?
That's what it is. That's what it is. So forget the 215, the 315. It's 274. Over 2,500 hits, however, over 1,600 RBIs. That's a lot. Gold Glover. Next set of clues. Let's see if there's any comedy in this. 11-time All-Star. That's a good amount. Led the league in RBIs twice. Led the league in games played 6 straight years. That's amazing. And I have won at least one MVP. So those are our progressive trivias thus far. And now we turn our lonely eyes to the college football playoff and to Ohio State and their predicament. They have 5 games. Games are being canceled left and right on them.
Michigan-Ohio State game, I believe, for the first time since 1917.
Yeah, 103 years. Yep, 103 years, ever since the birth of JFK. And that's rough. That's 3 games so far. It's been canceled for Ohio State. Nina, who is a big Cleveland Browns fan, Cleveland Cavalier, Indians, and Buckeye fan, you know, she understands the situation and she blames the Big Ten for starting so late and for, you know, not necessarily diving in when the ACC and Big 12 and SEC dove in. And certainly that's an issue right now because, you know, but at the same time, maybe they were right because they're getting a lot of COVID cases up there.
They are
up there. The second wave is striking that area of the country a lot more. And maybe they were right and they're just, you know, they're just in a bad position. But, you know, the big thing on Twitter or whatever it is, the big social media thing is Texas A&M now is off this week.
Yep.
Ohio State's now off.
Yep.
How agile is the NCAA to schedule a game between two top 5 teams?
Yes.
I love the idea, but it's not ever going to possibly happen. They're not that agile, are they, John?
No, it's a win-win for the NCAA, so clearly they won't do it. God almighty, why would we ever, if there's a bad decision to be made, why would we make the good one? We're the NCAA.
You know, I have a thought on the Big Ten.
Yeah.
Go ahead, John. Sorry.
No. Go ahead.
I think the problem they have is that they made their call so early.
Yeah.
They remember the Big Ten and the Pac-10 were so early out of the box making the call. And had they just held back and waited to see what happened, they could have gotten those early games in where there didn't seem to be that many problems. And you've seen it in other conferences where they're just saying, all right, these teams don't need to play. So we're not even going to play these games. Happened in the ACC. So maybe the Big Ten could have done some picking and choosing on what games needed to be played and what not had to be played. And they could have gotten some teams in this playoff, at least 18.
100%. We talked about that the other day. It's why did you commit to canceling the season so early when other conferences really hadn't even made up their mind yet, and there didn't seem to be anything there to say, you know, you have to make up your mind right now. Logistically, if the Southeastern Conference and the Big 12 and ACC can do it, the Big 10 can do it. But you're right. Earlier on in the warmer weather, when we weren't having quite as many outbreaks, they probably would have gotten a couple of these games in. Maybe we would lose the Ohio State-Michigan game because that's always a late season game. But at this point, Ohio State would have already qualified.
Yeah, and they would have had 7 games in at least at this point.
Yeah,
you know,
and it wouldn't have been an issue. So yeah, I mean, I think that's valid. I agree with Jeff. I think more so than them when they decided to starting later than people thought they had to. I think it was just committing way too early back in the summer to canceling everything. They could have carried that along.
Yeah.
And who knows? I mean, college football may not be able to end their season, period. At this point, we don't know 100% because we don't know if this continues to blow up, if some of these teams can't even play championship games. But that said, the big question now, outside of Texas A&M, Ohio State, which would be amazing, and I'm certainly
so good.
Jimbo Fisher would crawl across cut glass to play that game because boy, would that be, you know, if Texas A&M could then upset Ohio State, because that would clearly be an upset. Then I think the argument, if Florida gets blown out in the SEC championship game by Alabama, that, hey, you know, Texas A&M may be as good as anybody else in the country as well. There's also discussion about letting Indiana and Ohio State play for the championship, which I think would be great for the Big Ten. And then the other question, while we're on this, is, or will, outside of everything, will the Big Ten just simply decide that Ohio State is obviously a good enough team to play for a championship, so we're going to throw out the 5-game rule? This is going to require them to be agile, and I don't know that they can.
Yeah, that's interesting. If Texas A&M were to beat Ohio State, even by a point, right, and then Florida were to beat Alabama.
Yeah.
How do you think Florida, because now Texas A&M would have head-to-head beat the number 4 team.
Yeah.
And they only have one loss, and that's against Alabama. And Florida would have beaten Alabama, but their one loss is against Texas A&M. I still don't see how Florida gets in with that.
I didn't say Florida. That's not what I said. What I said was if Florida gets blown out by Alabama in the SEC championship game, if Texas A&M has a win over Ohio State, I think that they then could be in the discussion depending on what would happen. Because I think Texas A&M is going to be out of the discussion no matter what happens. I think they are the highest ranked team that will never be in the discussion because of where they're sitting. But I think if Texas A&M beat Ohio State,
they'd be in regardless at that point, right? Because
I don't know that they would. I don't know that they would be in regardless.
And even if Florida beat Alabama, is what I'm saying.
I don't know about that. I don't know about that.
I think Florida and Miami are in the same position right now. They're outshone in their own division. Their own conference.
Yeah, but Florida, all Florida has to do is beat Alabama, in my mind. If Florida beats Alabama, yeah, absolutely, 100%. Right. Yeah, so I think if they beat Alabama.
If Texas were to beat Ohio State,
Texas A&M, yeah,
Texas A&M beat Ohio State and finish the season with one loss and a win over a top 4 team, and probably be ranked number 4 going into the last weekend of the season because they will have beaten the number 4 team.
Yeah,
and Florida then beats Alabama, so that Alabama, Florida, Texas A&M all have one loss. Alabama's beaten Texas A&M. Florida's beaten Alabama, but Texas A&M's beaten Florida. You think Florida would hopscotch over Texas A&M?
I think there's a possibility because they would have played in one additional game, and it depends on what would happen in that game. Yeah.
And then your thing about Indiana and Ohio. Now, I thought it would be Ohio State and Northwestern since they're in 2 separate divisions.
No, the argument is that the teams with the best records, the 2 best teams, 2 best resumes at this point are Indiana and Ohio State. And they played such a great game at Ohio State that give them another shot at them at a neutral site. I've just heard that's an argument that's up there. So don't look at me like it's my idea and it's a stupid one. That's actually been talked about. And Indiana, by the way.
I know, but just because it's been talked about.
I'm just saying these are things that are out there for possibilities for what they could possibly do. Because if they are going to stick to this, that there has to be an additional game, then
I mean, just have a normal championship game. I mean, Northwestern's earned that right. They have one loss. Indiana has one loss.
Yeah,
I know Indiana's loss is a much better loss because it was to Ohio State as opposed to Michigan State. I think that's who Northwestern lost to. But it's sort of unfair if that's always been established that if you win your division that you play in the conference championship game.
Right.
I don't know.
Well, I think all of the conferences, and the ACC did it. I think all the conferences should have just played games and said the top 2 teams played for the champ. They should have thrown out that a long time ago.
And that's just the ACC, right? Only the ACCs did that this year, which I think is great. I agree with you, which means Miami could play Clemson again.
Yeah,
even though they're in the same. I mean, they were in the same division.
I would have thrown out the division play and expand the playoffs by 2 teams. That's what if that would have been what I would have put on the table for this season. I think it would have benefited you. I think you would have had a better playoff tournament than we're going to have, and I think you would have an opportunity, which you so infrequently have, for an actual real upset. Because the teams that end up, the top 4 teams that end there, Washington snuck in one year, but, it's generally been the same 6 teams on a rotation.
Which answers Joe Connolly's question.
What's that?
How can they justify a 5-win, maybe 6 when you have 8-0 Cincy, 8-1 Miami, 9-1 Liberty, 9-1 BYU, and 10-0 Coastal Carolina? Because it's Ohio State. They're supposed to be there.
Exactly. To quote Sergeant Barnes from Platoon, there's the way things are and the way they ought to be.
The Ohio Deep State is what I'm going to call it from now on.
Fair. Yeah, Prods. That's fair. That said, I mean, I think if you're a fan of college football and you want to see the best teams, I think it's hard not to argue that Ohio State is in the discussion with, maybe with a Texas A&M and a Florida. And as much as I love the Coastal Carolina story, there's no chance in hell that even an 18 playoff that they get. Of course,
yeah.
Be very difficult.
So here's another scenario I'm throwing your way, John. I know you get annoyed with this, but okay. So Florida beats Alabama.
Yeah.
Ohio State wins a 6th game, so they finish 6-0. Does Florida get in over Ohio State? Because they're going to get in over Texas A&M if Texas A&M just, they're
because they can't play for a championship. They can't. That's just
right.
They're robbed of an opportunity for one more quality win, no matter what, for Texas A&M, which is why I think playing Ohio State would be, the equivalent of that for them. In that scenario, I do think they would. I would lean towards yes, they would, but I think that would be an eye test thing a little bit. I think there is a little bit of eye test stuff going on with the committee. I think they are looking at teams. And again, I don't know what their criteria is at the end of the season. Is it the best resume top to bottom, or is it the teams with great resumes and who you believe is the best team at that point in time? I don't know what the answer to that question is because they've never really fully told us.
They haven't, and they won't.
No, because I don't think they know.
It's all a mystery.
I think it all depends on the year. I think it all depends on the year, so.
All right. So let's do another progressive trivia. The third set. It is not Cal Ripken. I saw Cal Ripken guess, and you haven't guessed, right, Johnny? You have not.
I have not guessed. No, I haven't.
All right. So played for 17 plus years, scored over 100 runs. John's not happy with me right now.
No.
In the season 2 times, batted a career 274.
Oh, paranoid.
Ignore the 315, 2,500 plus hits, 1,600 plus RBIs. It's a Gold Glover. Good work out of him. 11-time
overachiever.
Yes. Led the league in RBIs twice, led the league in games played 6 straight years, won at least one MVP. And the next one, led the league in home runs twice, never played in a World Series, won back-to-back MVPs, and hit over 500 home runs. So that should help. That should help a little bit. Never playing the World Series is a big guess, is a big clue. So I think Johnny is texting me as we speak. And we'll go to the next segment, which is about Mike Krzyzewski's comments and just the overall state of sports and the pandemic. Yeah. I think Jeff mentioned it earlier that the NFL so far has been agile, has dealt with problems, but they've moved on. They've rescheduled games. They've canceled or they just postponed some games. They've done a nice job, and so far, so good.
And it hasn't been perfect because I think that Steelers-Ravens thing, I think maybe if they had that to do all over again, they might choose to do that in a different way. But I don't think you can expect anybody to be perfect at any point in time, let alone this year. And again, I'm just impressed because of all of the sports leagues. Which one did you think would be the most monolithic? Yeah, I would have thought the NFL. And they proved that that's not the choice. That's not the answer.
And your guess, by the way, John, is absolutely correct. So well done.
Yep, thank you.
Yeah. So at any rate, Mike Krzyzewski comes on and talks about he's just wondering if they should reassess everything. The NCAA should reassess because it's getting worse. Mm-hmm. They're heading into the worst 6 weeks. We probably all agree with that. Now, let's start the whole conversation off with the caveat that these comments came after they lost by 15 to Illinois.
Right.
And they're 2-2. But he, in my opinion, he made some good points. He made some points that he just wants to reassess. He thinks they just set a date, they went for it, and they're just playing their games. They're just trying to get as many games as they can in before the tournament. He thinks that there's physical issues that are happening. There are mental health issues. Obviously, players can't go home for Christmas because of schedules and so forth. Something that they probably could use is what he said. He says, yes, there's vaccines coming. So why can't we reassess? Maybe wait a bit. There's going to be 20 million perhaps by the end of this month. There's going to be 100 million perhaps by the end of February. Why not be a little bit more agile? And he says the reason the NCAA is not agile, John, is because everything is decided by a committee. And he doesn't even know what committee's in charge of what directive. He has no idea. And he says it's just hard to be agile when you need a consensus.
No, I don't disagree with that. A couple things, if you throw out the comment that Mike Krzyzewski thinks that they should be agile and reassess, I mean, I think they all should be reassessing almost on a consistent basis.
Yeah.
Or on a constant basis at this point, because, and in college basketball, particularly because you really can't afford to lose games in college basketball and still, you could lose half your games, probably pretty close to it, and still put together a really viable tournament at the end of the season. If, hopefully things will be better then. But I think that is certainly something that they should be doing constantly, because we do need to look at it, and the numbers are going up and more games are getting canceled. But if his argument then is they should just pull the plug on it right now, then it really does look like 2-2 Mike Krzyzewski, which is what they are, is saying that. And I wonder if 1991 Mike Krzyzewski would have said that, because as we've said on this show again and again and again, and Colin Cowherd picked up on our show because we know he's a freaking listener, and they were talking about it today. What we're seeing in sports in 2020 is the most talented teams are the ones that are most likely going to win championships. The Dodgers were the best team in baseball. The Lakers were the best team in basketball, talent-wise. Everything. Mike Krzyzewski's
probably going to win the national
Alabama,
championship.
Clemson, Ohio State. I mean, it's, there's a reason teams haven't had as much practice. There's not as much structure, so the more talented teams win. Mike Krzyzewski's early 90s Dukes teams were always the most talented. They're not anymore. That's just part and parcel of the changes in college basketball. But that said, I think he is 100% right in the fact that they need to continue to reassess as the numbers go up. Is it safe? Does it make any sense to move on with it, or to just, again, it's college basketball. They play all games. Just a little pause. A little pause might not be a bad idea.
Just a bit of a pause. I mean, what do they normally play? About 30 games? 32 games ish.
Yeah. Well, gosh, with the preseason tournaments and stuff now, maybe, it may get up a little above that, but
if you can get 20 in, if you can get 20 games in, that's a fair, that's a fair way to access or to.
And if you can play enough teams in your conference as well, I mean, that has something to do with it, because they play a lot more out of conference games in college basketball. But if you can get through so that you have viable conference winners and
play the tournaments, play the conference tournaments.
Sure. Yeah. If you can. Yeah. It
just seems a little bit more, and I don't know if you guys agree with me, but college basketball does seem a little bit more Wild Westy in the COVID era and pandemic era than certainly the NBA or the NHL, but even more so than MLB and the NFL.
Well, there are many more teams, first of all.
It just seems a little bit more wild, a little bit more out of control. And there's been a lot of cancellations, and, big teams are not starting off well. And I'm not sure if that's a result of all of this. I mean, look at Kentucky. What are they, 1-3 for the first time since, I don't know, the Lincoln administration?
Reconstruction, I believe. Yeah.
Yes. So, it's very interesting. I will say this about college basketball. At least it's not like the college football. The big blue chip teams sometimes, get filtered out, and other teams have a chance to come in every single year. And certainly recently, to your point, John. But I don't know. I think reassessing it, calming down, taking a step back, I don't think there's anything wrong with that, because to your point, they can afford it. They can afford to miss that time and to check it out, especially at the height of what everyone says is going to be part of the pandemic. Over the entire year. This next 6 weeks is probably going to be brutal.
I think if you look at the numbers, the hard numbers, and I'm not an actuary or a statistics guy or even really particularly good at elementary math, but I think if you could look at it statistically, and you could see that as you continue to play deeper into the winter, the number of cases are going up on your teams and the number of games you're losing. I think that if you can come up with that correlation, then a pause makes sense. But you would have to come up with that correlation. You'd have to look around and see if outside of just normally what's going on, is this also accelerating the chance? And of course there's a lot of travel in college basketball. It's not just one game on a weekend that you can keep people, pretty isolated. It's a lot more difficult, and there are more teams involved, and there are more states involved, and there are more conferences involved, and there are independent entities involved, and more television contracts. And I mean, you could go on and on and on and on. It's just there are more moving pieces in college basketball.
Yeah. I was going to say, I think the committee that's making the decision is the television contract committee.
Well, follow the money. As always, that could be the name of the show.
That's why I think they're wanting to get these things in. I think that has a lot to do with a lot of these sports feeling the need to get games in no matter what, get a championship crown because of television contract money.
Well, and it's a catch-22. I mean, I understand the television folks as well, because it's a pandemic. Most of us are spending, if not all of our time at home, more of our time at home. So these games you're going to have more eyes on them. Perhaps in some way they'll monitor, and they will if they can, if they will, or either one of those things. They can get more money, sell more advertising, because more people are going to be there watching. And
having that game on the NFL last night, I mean, I sat and watched that whole game. I'm sure a lot of people did. It was an incredible thing to have another football game on a Tuesday night.
Yeah, I do wonder if moving forward, as people have enjoyed the Tuesday night game, and I wonder if moving forward, I wonder if the NFL works out so the Tuesday and Thursday thing become, so, there might be a week when there's not a Thursday night game, but maybe there is a Tuesday night game.
I saw an article that said that they're looking at possibly a 162 game season.
I like it. As long as there's no designated passers. That's what they'd have. So Tom Brady played till he's like 70. You're not allowed to touch him. They have like orange cones around it.
The NFL would have to have a designated everyone. You'd have to have like 350 guys on your squad.
Oh my God. Well, one of the big sticking points of moving to 18 game schedule in the NFL is the Players Association saying, okay, but you're going to need 10 extra contracts on every team. And the owners, of course, are going, that's not how it works on our plantation.
You need 10 extra linemen if you add a couple more games in. I mean, those guys are going to get roughed up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, maybe just a 52 game season. So just a game every week. I mean, come on. You guys can handle that.
Right.
A game every week. It is just football every single week.
And then it'd be like
forever.
It would be like soccer, or as they call it, football, or around the rest of the country, where those teams play so many games, and they don't mind like having guys take a couple of weeks off because they know we play so many games, we're going to lose X amount of games anyway. So why not keep our guys healthy? Do we really want to go play Bayern Munich with the first team? Nah, we'll send the kids.
If the NFL could do one thing that those soccer programs do, it would be relegating. We could relegate the Jets and the Cowboys.
Mark and I have advocated that in the NBA for years.
Yeah,
there should be a 4-team relegation at the bottom, and then there should be some like sort of second division teams in like Fort Wayne
with the G League. With the G League coming up, it's a possibility now.
Yeah,
and also MLB. I mean, that would eliminate tanking.
Yeah.
As a strategy to rebuilding your team, that would eliminate because because maybe you'd lose draft picks too if you're. Could you
imagine the Red Sox drop down? And I think the great thing would be if they drop down below the major league level, they had to play with aluminum bats. So it'd be just the ultimate indignity for these guys and the great part about that is that you get these teams that are relegated in the Premier League, and they got guys making like $40 million a year who are playing for like the Division II championship. So you'd have guys on the Red Sox making $112 million, and it'd be like, oh, got a big one against Des Moines tonight. Hope we can handle them. I love that. Just the embarrassment of it.
All right, so let's go to our progressive trivia winner, and we'll preview Friday's show, which should be a lot of fun because last week, John, remember there were 2 games between teams that were above 500. Now it seems like the majority of games are big, high stakes, 2 teams fighting for a playoff berth. It's the schedule's full of them this week. So it's going to be really a lot of fun. I played for 17 plus years, scored over 100 runs in the season 2 times, batted a career 274. Career numbers 315, disregard. 2,500 plus hits, 1,600 plus RBIs. Gold Glover. 11-time All-Star, led the league in RBIs twice, led the league in games played for 6 straight years, and I've won at least 1 MVP. And we know from the clues that he's won at least 2. Led the league in home runs twice, never played in the World Series. That's probably the giveaway. Won back-to-back MVPs. That's another giveaway. Hit over 500 home runs, and that's another giveaway. Not a giveaway, but things that can lead you very close. And John Pelkey got it after that third set of clues. It is great, the wonderful, the amazing Ernie Banks, that never really even sniffed the World Series, John. The closest the Cubs came was during Division Series that first year in 1969.
Right, yeah.
They had the lead. They were in control for most of the summer. And then the New York Mets, inexplicably, and we've talked about that on a deep dive, made a huge run in 1969. But Ernie Banks, what a guy, what a player, what a in a way kind of the face of the game for a while to some degree.
Yeah, one of them in a time where he was a player in that time when two teams made the postseason. So you could be on teams that never won championships, and you could be face of the league, which is really not possible any longer.
And he was really coming toward the end of his career when division play happened, and I think the Cubs were kind of in another maybe
71
or 71.
I thought 71 they were hanging around.
But 69, there was a great chance. Leo DeRocher was their manager, and they had a great team. They had Billy Williams. They had Ron Santo. They had Don Kessinger. Ken Holtzman as a Fergie Jenkins. It's a pretty loaded team.
Yeah, they were.
But the great Ernie Banks. So here we are now. We've got Friday's show coming. Derek Abbott will join us. He's going to break down a couple of games, and then he's going to talk about Josh Allen a little bit and that Buffalo Bills offense, which is remarkably explosive this year.
Yeah.
I mean, it's taken such a step up in terms of the entire offensive production, and their defense has always been pretty solid. And he's going to talk about what that offense is doing differently or how they're executing it more efficiently. And we're going to break down a couple of games as well from Derek. It's going to be a lot of fun. I think it's going to be the Steelers-Bills, so we can talk about that. That's a very good game. And then the Chiefs-Dolphins. I mean, that's a fun game as well.
Yeah.
I always go back to 1971, John, when I think Chiefs-Dolphins.
Longest game up to that point ever played. I think it's been eclipsed since then, but at that point, it was the longest game ever played.
Yeah, and it was a Christmas Day game, and it was the descendancy of the Chiefs, dynasty, and the ascendancy of the Dolphins dynasty.
That was their last. That was, if I'm not incorrect, wasn't that the last year that the Chiefs sniffed the playoffs until? I remember they got Frank Gans as a head coach at one point. I believe it was a special teams coach. It was like the flavor of the month, and he came in and they sniffed it again, maybe in like early 80s. But I mean, it's funny. They in Green Bay kind of disappeared right around the same time. It took Green Bay longer to come back. Kansas City had teams, I think a couple of teams in there, certainly under Marty Schottenheimer that got closer than Green Bay teams did for a while. But that was the last gasp, really, of the Kansas City Chiefs. They may have made the playoffs one additional year.
No, they did not make the playoffs until 1986.
Oh, so was okay.
And I think that was John Mackovic.
John Mackovic, former Texas head coach as well.
Yep. And then they made it again in 90, and then they became a perennial playoff team under Marty Schottenheimer. But that 1971, they were 10-3-1, and they were playing this divisional game on Christmas Day, and did not make the playoffs again until 1986. So it was really the descendancy of that and the ascendancy of the Miami Dolphins. Okay,
no, that was the Dolphins doing sort of what they didn't do later in Dan Marino's career. Was the Chiefs were the favored team in that. That game was at Arrowhead. And I think everybody figured the Chiefs would have given Dallas a better game than Miami gave them because they didn't give them much of a game and they upset them. And unfortunately for Miami, they were on the other end of that later on in their career with a Buffalo team that upset them when they should have been. They would have given a better game I can't remember what year that was, but then certainly the year New England beat them when they could have gone and played the Chicago Bears.
85, they were at home for that championship game. 92 against the Bills. You're talking about the shovel pass game.
Right.
That was at home as well.
And I think everybody thought that Miami team would have given Dallas a much better game than the Bills. Though the Bills in that second Dallas Super Bowl actually did play relative. Or was that the first one? 92?
No, that was the second. That was the first time against Dallas. It was their second Super Bowl.
Right.
Oh, no, it was their third. I'm sorry. It was their
third Super Bowl.
And it was the second against Dallas, and they were up 13-7 or whatever it was at halftime.
Yeah.
So, that's awesome. We're going to talk about those games. Derek is going to break those down. We're going to have a good time on Friday. And I also want to invite, because I think it's time, John, and you can shoot this down if you want, because this is a collaboration. It is not, I don't make unilateral decisions. we don't.
You
go
can't
with
do
you.
it in an office during a meeting though. You're going to do it right here live. You're going to make your decision right here live.
Well, I'm just throwing it out there. I think this is really the best place to do it, Jeff, in a way, for a lot of reasons. I think you agree with that. And I want to bring back the deep dive, and I'm willing to be the first one to do it.
Okay.
And I'd like our listeners to write in on podcastafr@gmail.com. That's podcastafr@gmail.com with some ideas. Lenny, I know you threw in one when we were talking about bringing it back, maybe a couple months ago at this point, or certainly a few weeks ago. You had mentioned the 1960 sports year. Obviously, Mazeroski with that year. It was the first year that, what the Packers did in 1960 against the Eagles. They turned everything around in basically 2 years and were in the championship game.
Mm-hmm.
And
there was the championship game Lombardi ever lost.
That's right. And there was the Olympics. Is that Rome?
Rome, yeah. Cassius Clay.
So there's that's a possibility. We did 1968. We've done 1941 in terms of years. Mm-hmm. But anything else out there? A documentary that you would like to see that you haven't? That's how we started this whole thing back in the day, Johnny.
Yeah, my favorite sports documentaries, because it was back when that was it the Bulls documentary? Doesn't that seem like 167 years ago? The documentary on the Jordan's Bulls. That was all we talked about.
Yeah,
for like a month, because there were no sports going on. So we were saying, what documentary would you like to see? So 1960. All right, that's a year of your birth. So throw that in. Maybe interview your mom. Nana could come on, talk about 1960 and what it was like.
Born during a Niners game, which is
what it was like when the doctor prescribed a quart of gin and 2 packs of Luckies for all expectant mothers,
and 7 or 8 diet pills a day.
Exactly.
So it explains a lot. Actually,
I'm thinking speed, nicotine, and alcohol. That'll get you there. And by the way, you're going to need a lot more of that once the kids are born too. Good Lord.
One of the closest elections in American history was that year as well. Mm-hmm. Also, a lot of accusations of stealing that election. Yep. So, there's that happened 60 years ago.
But neither side could be too adamant about that, because I think they both realized they'd stolen votes on both sides.
Yeah, and Nixon took the high road on that, and then there he is 8 years later, winning the presidency, and then in 4 years after that, I think that still remains the biggest landslide of all time, John.
49 states.
Yeah, 40. He got McGovern got Massachusetts, right, in D.C.
The District of Columbia. Massachusetts and D.C. That was it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think the difference was, the difference this year is 6 million, which is a lot closer than most elections, actually. Mm-hmm. 6 million votes. Mm-hmm. I think, that year, what was the difference? How many millions of votes between Nixon and McGovern?
11 billion. I don't think McGovern voted for himself.
No, I don't think so.
I think he admitted it later.
He didn't get his own state, South Dakota. They didn't go for him. No one went. No one went for George McGovern.
72 was that's an interesting sports year as well.
Actually, that's a good call, Johnny. That is a good call, because it's that Munich Olympics,
Mark
Spitz, and of course
started the Amazing A's run, the undefeated Miami Dolphins. Yeah, there's a lot. 72, first year that I played organized football, and my team, the Springfield Boys Club Rough Riders, won the county championship. Yours truly as the starting guard on that team. And the
72 is a good one. 72 is a very interesting year.
I should mention the aforementioned Steve Carricker, who was an offensive lineman in college, was the quarterback on that 8-year-old team, and he was quite a fine quarterback. So 72, might have to think about that.
Lenny mentions 1960. The AFL is also born. That's pretty interesting.
That's great stuff. Then you can watch Full Color Football, which is available on YouTube. The great, I believe it was a Showtime documentary or Cinemax. Anyway, 5 episodes, and it's the history. Every episode takes 2-year period, and it's the history of the AFL. It's one of the most enjoyable documentaries on NFL you'll ever see.
Okay, before we go, Joe Connolly has thrown out, do you guys agree with the Dolphins popping champagne and Zonka drinking his scotch? And, for years, I'll speak for myself. I think John is with me on this. For years, we couldn't have rolled our eyes anymore with all of that happening. It was like, please, are you kidding? You haven't won a championship since the Nixon administration. Really? Are you going to remind us all of that all this time? But at this point, It's Larry Zonka. He's in his 70s.
Plus, we're old now. We're old now, and we know we'll never have another achievement in our life. So might as well drink to the ones we've had.
Yes, some of those years though were exciting by the time, and they'd go to them at the end of the game to show them all doing it. They'd all be together. It was a pretty cool thing back in the day. Now, granted, now that is he the only one left?
I believe several others survive.
No, there's
Bob Greasy still doing live.
I think Mercury Morris is still alive.
He is.
Paul Warner.
Zonka was the only one they felt worthy of going to show him drinking this guy.
Well, he's always been kind of the most. It was he and Bonacani.
Bonacani was then, and he's passed away.
Yeah, and so they were the most adamant about. But I think, come on, it's fun.
I agree.
Wasn't Nick Bonacati like the Dolphins play-by-play guy on radio or something? So he was always involved.
I think he was on that.
Might color commentary.
I think he did that for a while. My buddy Steve Carricker, former University of Virginia football player and Peach Bowl champion, which Mark would have taken away from him until he was told otherwise. Till he saw the light. Till he saw the light. Then he saw the light.
Even when I was in the dark, even when my eyes had not opened. Yeah. And I was not enlightened. Before that, I was still a fan of the Peach Bowl. Of course.
All right. Okay. All right. Fair enough. That's right. If it's fruit or a flower, you're good. But if it's some sort of another sort of item of any sort, then you
anything mechanical. Anything mechanical.
Yes.
Yeah. Mark is very pre-industrial revolution.
Well,
I'm just stay in your lane, people. You know, flowers and fruit. You know, the Rose Bowl had the flowers. You know, there's a lot of fruit happen. You know, there's a lot of people freezing.
Orange Bowl, you could have come up with that. It's pretty quick. As the Orange Bowl.
Sure.
Well, I'm just mentioning because Steve has commented, which used to be the Tangerine Bowl, by the way, back in the day.
Yeah.
As the kids used to say. That was the Russia won the Olympic gold in basketball that year. Incredibly controversial.
Oh my gosh!
And HBO actually, there's a documentary on that as well. And it's interesting because some of the best basketball players in the country did not go and play for Hank Iba in '72. Most notably, Bill Walton. Bill Walton did not play, which is interesting because '68, Lou Alcindor didn't go. For soon to become Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and then Bill Walton. So UCLA centers apparently they're as anti-Olympics as you, Mark.
They don't love America. Bill Walton obviously did not love America at that point.
I love me some Bill Walton.
Yeah.
But that is absolutely a great one because they're that.
I mean, what are they?
In hindsight, those guys have never gotten their silver medal. You know that, right? The guys the '72 silver medal U.S. Olympic basketball team didn't show up to pick up the medals, and the medals are still in, I believe, Zurich, Switzerland, is where the Olympic International Olympic Committee is housed. Wherever the most expensive.
Wasn't it 3 different chances that Russia got to win the game?
Yes.
I mean, it was egregious, was it not?
It was egregious. It was egregious, but it also kind of spurred USA Basketball, I think, to look beyond, because Hank Iba, who was the coach then, and he is a legendary basketball coach, but I believe he was also a War of 1812 veteran. So he was, ancient and was not, that team should have been better than it was. Doug Collins, I believe, was the guard on that basketball team, but they never, ever got their silver medals. And this documentary.
If Walton had loved America more, they would have won that.
I agree. But the Russian guys on that Russian team were like, we wanted to have I was just going to do a bad Russian accent. I'm not going to do it. But they're like, we should all get together and talk about the game. And then they could pick up their silver medals. And those guys were like, no, we don't want it. We don't want it. That's a great one.
Have some vodka.
72.
We talk about
72 is interesting. 60 is interesting. So if you want to chime in, podcast afr@gmail.com. I don't think the episode 100 will work to bring back the deep dive because that's on a Friday before the holiday week, and the NFL and the NCAA will be, heating up. There'll be lots to talk about. So we'll figure out a time to do that.
And then the 25th is on a Friday, right? This year? Isn't 25th is on a Friday? So I think we're probably not going to do a Christmas Day show.
Probably not.
So, and then it's New Year's Day.
It is.
So should we bring it back for 2021? Is that the question? We bring it back for 2021.
I think that's a good call. I think that's
let's pre-record it and release it on Christmas. Pre-record another one and release it on New Year's Day.
I don't know. That's actually kind of fun.
Just to answer Joe Connolly, everyone knows that a fiesta is when fruits and flowers come together.
Yes, indeed. And the Fiesta Bowl bought its way in. I'll never forget the Fiesta Bowl bought its way into the rotation with that Penn State Miami matchup that they were able to put together. And I believe that was maybe the first year that they got Tostitos involved, and they threw a crap load of money at them. And that's how you got national championship games back then.
Yeah. And the Fiesta has, been
maintained
right there ever since, and is now one of the rotating national championship bowl games. So
they took advantage of the fact that they didn't have conference tie-ins at that time, and you had independents that were very, very good, or conferences that didn't have bowl tie-ins. So smart people out there.
There's no doubt about it. All right, so that's it for our show. I don't think there's anything else to talk about at this point in time, except for the fact that yes, I am probably philosophically very against the Industrial Revolution. For Jeff Taylor, John Pelkey, I'm Mark Ferreira. This has been a fun show. We'll talk to you with Derek Abbott on Friday. Thanks.